So we're now going to work on this leaf, and in order to do that properly I'm going to have to turn the paper round, and you might find it easier too. So let's go like this, because then our wrist action takes in that lovely curve there, and it makes it easier for us to follow the lines. Okay, so I'm just going to not that there's anything here to worry about, but I'm just going to put a piece of paper there to protect some of the colour work that we've already done. So obviously the first thing to do is to pick out any little bits of graphite that we think might show. Now, bearing in mind that this is quite a good green leaf, the green will cover any of our graphite, but we just want to not have too much showing. So just put that in there like that. Yeah, that's enough. Good. Now then, I'm going to do the veins first, and for this so I'm going to do earth green and a little bit of cream on this one, because it's quite a bit different to the one up the top here that we've already done. So the nice sharp pencil from about here, just put in just a little skimming, just use some nice stroke marks for this, and just come all the way down here and go right to the end. And then we're going to put in we'll go, let's see, we'll just go on the underside, I think, of the graphite line. Not that it makes much difference, they're very close, won't show too much. But I do know that when I put in my main marks, I usually kind of look for the darkest side of the vein, and that's this towards me, so it's easier to just go and put these marks in just by the side of your graphite. So there we go, and like that. They don't show very much up here, but can always colour over them if we've got too many. This one is very, very pale, and we're going to put some cream over the top of this, as I said. I think I said. There we go. And this one's quite bright. And again, I'm not going to use the embossing tool for these. I do think that if you can not use it, I do think that the leaves do look better, but just every now and again it's a necessary evil. Now, taking the cream, come down the side here, just be careful not to touch those little graphite marks that we've left. We'll remove those a bit later, but just put this warmth over the top. You can see straight away that it just makes a lot of difference to the colour of the veins. And you know, when you put the darker green on either side of these, I mean, they show up a lot paler than you think they will. There we go. Fantastic. Okay, so that's those done, so we can go straight in with our darkest colour. Now, this is a strange one because it's a kind of, it really is a yellowy green, and I did consider using olive green yellowish as well, but I'm still going to use my chromium green opaque first, and we'll see how we go. We can always add a little bit of something else. We're obviously going to be adding a little bit of earth green yellowish at some point, although I actually admit that I haven't got that out on my desk, but that'll come later. So lovely sharp point, and although we don't go all around the leaf at once with the same colour, we are going to just put in a little bit down here so that we can show some of these serrations until we get to about here, and then we don't worry about the rest for a minute because it's a bit paler up here. And then we're going to put in a nice line, cover the graphite just there, and then we want to just make sure that we keep that vein, and on this side that vein is just a tiny little bit darker and it's very thin, so you need that point just to make sure that you really do just leave the finest, and then it will just disappear into there. And then we'll just come up a tiny little bit and do the next one. I'm going to do this side of the vein first, up to there, and then just a little bit lighter on the other side. And then we'll just do one more coming up here. Get this little bit done to start with. Make sure you've got that super sharp point in there. And then lighter on that side. There. Okay, so now we're going to use some of our little circular movements and just very lightly colour this in so that it looks as if you've just taken a brush and painted it on. So we don't want to see any pencil marks. And don't worry if your outside edge that we did first looks a little bit darker, because we'll be adding some extra colour of this colour to make sure that there's a lovely soft gradation. We just get this first layer down. And just bring that up to about there where we've finished the edge, and then we can put in some on this side. Just take your time, make sure you get nice even colour. and then we'll bring it up almost to this next vein along, but then we're going to go back and put in a little bit of shading. And you'll have built up a little bit of a chisel point as well on your pencil now, so if you turn that round halfway, then you will have a lovely sharp point again. And now what we're going to do is come back here and just start putting in a little bit of extra depth on that edge and just softening your pencil line as you come inwards, so that you've just got a nice soft gradation coming over and into the leaf, so that that line at the edge doesn't show as just a line, and it starts to make it look much more alive and three-dimensional as well. And then we want a little bit of extra shading now on this side only, so these veins don't show up that much, as you will see from the photograph, so we don't want to over egg it by putting in too much. So we just put a little bit in down here, and then just again soften that edge as you come up. This one doesn't, it fizzles out quite quickly, this one, so we're just going to make sure that we've just got a little bit in there, and then it fizzles out about here, so we can now just go over that bit there. That's absolutely fine. Make sure that just goes into a little point that you eventually just can't see. And then on this one we've got a little bit of darker still. It's a bit darker than this one, so you can add a little bit of extra just in here. And bring that up, and that will just kind of fizzle out as it comes up there somewhere. Just goes into a nothingness, and we can just add a tiniest little bit of extra shading just on this side. Really very, very little, doesn't need much. And then we can put a little bit on this one as well. And you can see how quickly that actually comes to life, and they look much more prominent now and realistic, but just not too much. So while I've still got a nice sharp chisel on here, I'm now going to come along this edge, but just not quite as dark as the beginning, and I will bring this all the way down to here like that, and then just we can continue putting in these very gentle. I mention this so often, but only because I never know whether you've followed any of my other projects before this one, or this is your first one, but if you can imagine pressing so lightly that you can hardly feel the paper and the point of the pencil joining together, and then imagine the other extreme where you're pressing so hard that you would break the point. So that's your kind of a pressure gauge that you will have to work out for yourself, but I'm using a pressure of no more than 1 when I'm doing this. You know, the little circular movements, obviously a bit more when I'm going and doing the lines, but it is just so light and so gentle. just want to skim the paper with colour and then add where we need to. So let's come over now to this edge of this one and put in a little bit, and of course you've got to be careful because your central main vein gets thinner and thinner, so you've got to have a super sharp point. Some people at this point would prefer to use an embossing tool to indent those veins to make sure that they stay. As I said, I prefer not to unless I really have to, but I can leave enough for a gap to make sure that they show up, and do it by eye rather than the embosser. And that one will just fade out as well. And I just want to make sure that this one shows up a tiny bit more, so I'm just going to put in a little bit of extra dark there and a little bit of extra dark there, and that's all we need. And then you can bring a nice sharp line along that main vein and just curl that at the bottom. Make sure that it has got that gentle curve. If it's straight, it won't look realistic. Just make sure that there's no sharp edge lines on the edge. There we go. And I'm just going to add just in a couple of places where there's a bit of serration, just a slightly darker edge, and it makes the serration show up nicely. So good. Just going to make sure my pencil's super sharp. Tiny little bit. There we go. And then we can do the other side. So we have dark on this edge here. These serrations actually are quite tiny but prominent, so, and that's because, where's my lovely brush, that's because I pressed a little bit too hard because I wanted to get those serrations in, but no harm done. Well, there's a tiny speck there that I can get out with a tiny little bit of sticky back plastic. There we go, get rid of that. So don't need to press quite that hard, obviously. These serrations, it is important if you're tracing the line drawing that I've given you, to make sure that you do get them all in properly and not just randomly. They're not all the same. They are different shapes as you go down, and that's again what makes them look realistic. So be aware to not just go zig 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 all the way down, and they're definitely not that pointed anyway. Right, I feel as if I'm lecturing you, but it's all so that you get something that looks unbelievably real at the end of it, obviously. So just bring that right up and over that first vein, because there's a shadow on this side of the main rib anyway, so you can come all the way along and get thinner as we go. Until we get to about there, and then we can stop for a moment, and then we'll put in the darker side first. Whoops. Now I've got a, well, I've actually still got a good sharp chisel point, so I shall carry on. And let's just put in, actually I think I'm just going to rub that along my bit of sanding block just to make sure that that's nice and pointed again. Don't always have to sharpen it, as long as you've got a nice good sanding block. And let's put the other side in as well. This side is slightly darker. Right, we'll get these two done first. There's a tiny little yellowish blemish. Just going to leave a hole at the moment for that. My pencil actually is getting to the point where it needs to go into an extender. It's just a wee bit short. So next time I come to sharpen it, I think I'll have to put it in an extender. I can't stress enough how important it is to treat the leaves with the same amount of care and respect as you did the plums, because although the plums are the star of the show, they will look really dreadful if your leaves haven't been done well. The leaves do really make the difference. So it's important. Every little bit is as important as the next to make up the whole illustration at the end without anything jumping out, because sadly the first thing that anyone sees is the bit that's not good rather than the bit that is. Apologies, but I've got emails pinging around and I didn't put the sound down on my phone. Right, that's it. I'm going to sharpen this and put it in an extender. There we go. Right, that's better. Now then, let's just put in a little bit of green here. And then let's just concentrate on these other few veins. Now they're not very prominent, but they're there, so just make sure that you just draw carefully on either side. Just leave the tiniest gap. And then we'll just go up to this one with our little circles first. And then this gap. And then we've got to put in that central vein just there. Make sure we don't lose it. And then just make sure you follow it right to the end, getting thinner and thinner and thinner until it comes to that little point at the top there. Right, so now we can actually put in some depth. Now, if you look at the photograph as a whole, you will see that down this side of the main rib vein, it is darker, so we can concentrate on a little bit of that first, about to there we'll go, and then this needs now colouring but shading at the same time, so a little bit of extra depth on this side of the vein. And then we'll come back down here and extra shading on this side of the vein and also coming out from here. Make sure that vein shows. And that will get just a little bit lighter coming up here, and then darker here and coming up again to lighter, so that that middle section looks as if it's raised slightly. And then come down here and then that just fizzles out that vein as well, as does this one that's coming round here. We want just a little bit of extra depth in there. And then we want a little bit of shading on this vein, and a little bit of extra in there, and then a little bit darker just on the top edge of that. These ones are so fine, don't worry actually if you even lose one a little bit, it won't matter. Just try and get them in if we can. And just a little bit lighter on that edge, we'll add a little bit of earth green yellowish I think on there, but you can see how that side is slightly darker. So now we can adjust with a light stroke, we can adjust a little bit more just in there, just add a tiny little bit of extra. Doesn't need much. There we go. Just want to add that little blemish in, which is a kind of a warm, I'm going to use a light yellow ochre and just put that little colour spot in there, and take it over the green a little bit, and then we'll just add a little bit more green, same green, chromium green opaque, and just blend that in a little bit. And you can see how these veins do stand out probably a little bit more than we need, so I'm just going to skim the chromium green opaque across that one because it's just a little bit too prominent. And now I'm going to use I think I am going to use a little bit of the olive green yellowish and just put a little bit of that just lightly over the top here. Just want to give it a slightly different hue. And again, I'm doing this quite quickly because I'm skimming so lightly that it's not making any difference. I've already filled in the tooth of the paper with the chromium green opaque, so I can just skim this across the chromium green opaque to give it just a slightly warmer look without worrying about any pencil marks showing. And I'm going to put a little bit of that on this side as well. Again, just literally just a skimming. There we go. And then I'm going to add a little bit of cream rather than the earth green yellowish because I want to just get a little bit more warmth into this. And again, this is just skimming across the top So you can be quite quick, but not rough. Please don't be rough, because if you press too hard, your pencil lines will show. So just be gentle and just get this across here just a little bit. And then when we use the transparent colourless blender, this will all just blend together really nicely. I want a little bit more of this cream up on this edge anyway, like that. And then I'm just going to, there's just a tiny area here that's just a tiny bit lighter. Just going to literally pick just a little area off there so that it looks a little bit paler. There, that's all I wanted. Right, there we go. So I think that looks absolutely fine as it is. If anything, what I would do, and in fact I'm going to, is I'm just going to use a tiny bit more of the earth green, not the earth green yellowish, and just make sure that some of these veins towards the end are just maybe a little bit darker so that they just disappear into the leaf, because you can't see them all, like that. That's all I needed to do. Just make sure that there's enough down there as well. Yeah, there we go. So then I will use, as I say, my colourless blender, but I don't use that until the very end anyway. So that's another little leaf done. So now we can concentrate on this very, very pale one at the back. So this one at the behind, it's so, let me move there so that you've got it right in front of you. Right, it's very, very pale. It really is. It's the back of a leaf, and it's a dying leaf as well. It doesn't make life any easier that we actually can't see where it actually joins, but in fact it joins behind here, so it's on this little node, but the stalk and that leaf are hiding it. But we're going to put it in because it actually does add quite a lot to the composition of the piece, and let's face it, Mother Nature put it there, so we're going to put it there. Okay, so putty rubber first, because this is so pale. So what we need to do is just really pick out a lot of this graphite, and we've got some very, very pale veins in here as well, so we're going to treat the whole thing with a great deal of delicacy. Almost difficult to actually get enough of the graphite off without, I don't like using a putty rubber to rub, I prefer to just dab with it, but it's sometimes we just really need to get rid of an awful lot of these markings so that it's barely visible. There we go. I think we should be all right with that. So what we're going to do is use sap green light, which is a Prismacolor, and we're going to go on either side of the veins really. So let's just put in some sap green light here, and there aren't many veins that really show, so in fact I've missed one about here, but don't worry if you can't see it. I'm just going to leave a tiny gap like that and put in a little bit of sap green light just along there and there, and we'll hint at another one there with just a little bit of this colour too. And then we have a little bit of it, this colour up here, very gentle markings here. We have this one here which shows mostly on this side, funnily enough, so we'll put in a little bit more just there, and we'll bring just a little bit of the sap green light almost to the edge, just there. And then let's just get in a little bit down this edge. And then on this side, just put in where I put that little pencil mark there, just put in a little bit of this, leave a gap. And then we've got another vein kind of coming up, kind of comes up and down like that, so we'll just put in a little marking for that too. Don't worry about that graphite mark, we can cover that with the stalk when we do it. And on this edge, still got to try and get in those serrated edges if we can, even though they're very pale. Okay, down here we can put in a little bit of a marking there. Again, this green leaf, don't worry, because it's much darker, so we'll be fine. We have a vein coming out here, and you can just about see the other side of it as well, and a little edge. And on this side we have a few little darkish bits on the serrations. We'll probably add a little bit of something like a raw umber probably when we get to that edge, because it's decaying, so it's already started to go a little bit brown. And then we have that one coming out from there, and one coming up here. Okay, right, so we've got kind of a body of colour on. Now let's put in a little bit of grey-green light, and then we might need to add some more of the sap or some pale sage. So we just fill in a little bit here. This is being done so quickly because it is so pale. It won't take us a minute to get this bit done, but still with respect, don't forget. Right, I'm going to add some cream. Oh gosh, do you know what? I don't think so. I think it needs ivory, which of course I haven't got out. Soon get one of those, I think. Ivory. Oh, that was typical that I can't find my ivory. Just 1 second. I've got it somewhere. Here we go. Run across to the other side of the studio. There we go. Right, an ivory. I'm just going to use some ivory actually on the veins. They don't really show up very much. Yeah, I think that was probably better than the cream. I think the cream would have been too much. And these again, they just little hints of venation. We don't need to worry too much. They all seem to blend into the decaying green. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to add, I think, I don't think with the pale sage is going to be right. I think more of the sap green is probably going to enhance this now. So let's start down here and just put in another little layer very gently, just to give that some extra depth. And on this side of that vein as well, just so that it shows up a little bit more. You don't even need to worry about sharp edges on these veins because they're so pale. Yeah, good choice of colour, I think, this. If you haven't got the Prismacolor sap green light, then a light layer of earth green in the Prisma range with cream over the top would be the nearest you could get and would be absolutely fine. So don't think that it's not going to look right. It would look absolutely fine. Come down that edge now, I think, with this. Just fade that inwards a little bit. Just there, if anything, I would say we do need a little bit of the pale sage for the extra warmth it has. It's got a little bit more creamy yellow to it. Just going to add that in there, and so I'm just going to bring that down and over into some of these veins as well. Yeah, it's good. It's fine. It's enough to show that this is a leaf on its way out, as it were. So now I'm going to get a tiny little bit of what do I need? Brown ochre, I think, is going to be good for this, and I'm just going to enhance just 1 or 2 of the ends of these little serrations, not all of them. Actually might have been a bad choice, it's just a little bit bright. Then one or two little spots and dots as well. Yeah, that was a bit of a mistake, but don't worry, because what I'm going to do is just use a tiny little bit of chromium green opaque and just slightly make them greener. So just on one or two of these little bits here, that'll just tone it down a tiny little bit, and just a tiny little few on there as well. And then, because that stands out quite a lot, we then just pick it off with a putty rubber so that we can just fade that in a little bit. There we go. And do you know, honestly, that is all you need for that one. I wouldn't worry about it at all. It's just one of those ones that are in the background a bit, and it will be absolutely fine. So I suggest the next one we do is this one here. So for this little one here, obviously we've got to just pick out a little bit of graphite, but not too much, because it's quite a dark leaf, this one, so you don't have to worry too much. So first of all, pale sage down the top side of that marking that I've made there, and into there. These ones will probably have to change, but we're going to make them pale sage for the moment, just by the side of that graphite line there. And then down here, it gets a bit creamier when we get to the bottom end there. And this one's very pale there, and this one is, I think we'll go on this side this time, and that one in there and up there, and then there's just a hint of one just there that comes, well, it doesn't really come anywhere, so just leave it where it is. Let's put a little bit of actually, again, I'm going to use ivory. We'll put a little bit of ivory down here, but what we need to do, just in this little stalk here, just make sure you've got nearly all of that graphite off, and then just put the ivory in there, and we can define the edges at the end, but we just needed to make sure that that had a little bit of colour on it before we start. Now, to start with this one, I'm actually going to use a tiny little bit of Caput Mortuum, not the Caput Mortuum Violet, just the Caput Mortuum. I'm just going to take that all the way along that central vein to there, and then just very, very quickly soften that out. By quickly, I don't mean do it fast, I mean you've only got a tiny little bit where you want it on the paper, so you've got to get it faded carefully. And then it's up this vein as well, just a little bit, and again just a hint. Some of the green will cover this, but we do need it here in the first place, and there's just a little bit of it, incredibly carefully please, but along this edge. and the tiniest little section on that vein there, and then there's just the tiniest touch on this side as well, in there. It might show up too much at the moment, I promise you it won't, but we do have it on the edge of this leaf as well. Not all the way, just in parts. And I'm not even going to try and blend that in. I think I'll leave that to the green. But we do also have some, just going to make that just a tiny bit more shapely in there, and that one, because we want these to show against the plum. And then just take your pencil off now and again so that it's not a complete line, and it always looks better. And then let's just put just a hint of this just up there like that, and just the hint on that one as well. Okay, that's all we need for that, and then we're going to dive straight in with our lovely chromium green opaque, which I've taken out of the pencil holder because it was just a bit too long, and we'll see how we go with this. So let's start up this top end. Make sure that that lovely central vein just curves at that top bit there. And then just we'll go straight in with putting on the little circular movements here. There's a tiny vein there that's almost invisible, so I haven't marked it in. So I'm just going to put in, it's just by that dot where there's a little hole in the leaf. I'm just going to put that there. So this is a much warmer leaf with a lot more colour on it, so we can just, a pressure of probably about 2 or 3 here will be fine. Since we've made sure that we put that vein in, just make sure that you leave a gap for now, just a tiny one. And then let's just make sure that we go round that little hole in the leaf there, so that we get that in, because that actually adds to the interest. And then just come down by that vein there. Oh gosh, a very, very sharp point on that, so it's pinged off. So don't forget, all these veins, they do disappear at the ends, so it's only these ones, you know, the bit nearer the main vein that we need to really worry about. Just need to sharpen this. Okay, that's better. Right, now then, you will see when we put the chromium green opaque over the caput mortuum that it just knocks it back. In fact, some of these veins could do with being a bit darker, but you usually find that when you've got the vein in, you think, oh, that's the right colour, but as I said before, when you put the darker green on round the sides of the veins, suddenly they pop out a little bit more than you want them to. But that's the beauty, that you can always skim over them with just a tiny bit more colour. Okay, so I'm just going to go along this edge while I'm here and just make that a bit darker. And I'm going to make that a bit darker, and just in there, and then I'm just going to go over that vein with this, just so that it's there but not as prominent as it was. And then I'm just going to come up this side as well, get this to be a little bit darker. Need to look at the tone of this leaf in front compared to that one behind, and it's quite a few tones darker, so you know, putting it in makes it look much more like the real thing. Just add a little bit more depth with another layer. And then we just want to just put in a little bit of extra colour on the edges and just soften those inwards. Okay, so we can start on this other side, start at this bottom end and get that in there. And on this side. And then you just want to make sure that you edge into the vein just a tiny little bit, because it's just got a slight shadow on that one side. So we just soften the edge of the where it's protruding from the back of the leaf. Now follow these lovely edges that you've already done with your caput mortuum. Shows more in the middle section than it does anywhere else, so just of course when we put the colour of the stalk on, the stalk is, again, thinking of your tones, the stalk is a few shades darker than this leaf, so it will really pop out and start to look very realistic. But like I said, you know, ugly duckling before the swan. And then just skim over that vein so that it doesn't quite show that much. Okay, now top end. Let's start here. And just a little bit there. Now I can see from my my outline drawing that this vein, according to the photo, should be just coming out from here. So why I didn't put it there, I don't know, but it's not going to matter. But I just wanted you to know that I have seen that and it won't make any difference. Right, now let's just now add a little bit more depth with this one. Make sure we've got enough green on, and then we can warm it up a little bit. You see what I mean about the veins? They almost look white. So when you put your vein color down, it's never going to be quite right. You always have to darken a little bit. So I'm just going to skim across that, and I'm going to skim across that as well. And I just want to make sure that that little blemish has got a dark edge just there. We want a little bit more green just on this little edge here, a little bit darker just in there, and then just skim across that as well, and that one, like that. And then we're going to add, I've got to find it quickly, my earth green yellowish, which I have here. quickly finish my coffee. And then we're just going to go over all of this with just one light layer of earth green yellowish, because you can see how quickly it just warms it up. It's not necessarily going to darken it, but it just warms that whole beautiful leaf up. And now on this side, not so much, just to about here. Want that bit to be paler. And then I'm just going to use my putty rubber to pick out just a tiny bit of colour just here, and maybe just a bit up there. And then I'm going to use the grey-green light, and I'm just going to put in a little bit of grey-green light in there and in there to show a little bit of opacity, and also just up here. There we go. And then that bottom of the stalk that I mentioned, so just use the caput mortuum ever so gently, and just soften that tiny edge in there to make it look slightly rounded. There we go. And hey ho, that's that one done as well. Looks beginning to look really lovely. I mean, we've got a nice big cluster of leaves to do now, so we can turn the paper around the other way again. So I'm now going to work on the biggest leaf here, because it is the biggest and the most prominent, and then we can add in the other ones on either side before we get to do all the little stalks and twigs. So now we have in here, there's a little bit of a leaf here, which you can see, and there's a little bit of the same leaf here, and it goes behind this one, so you will see that just in here we have a shadow of where it's picking up some leaf from behind. So we need to put that in first before we even do the veining, and for that I'm going to use a tiny touch of dark sepia. But as always, less is more. We don't want too much of this. So without taking off any of my graphite lines to start with, I'm just going to look in here. You've got a little bit of the main vein here, and it actually just skims down there. So if you can just get that in, almost next to but not touching the fruit, and then just bring just the tiniest little bit of this down here, and it really is very, very gentle. We really do not want very much at all, although fortunately we know that we can pick little bits out. So let's just get some shading in here. Very gently, pressure of 1 max for this. And then when you get to this vein, you just want to just put the lightest line above the vein, like so, and then underneath we can put in just a little bit more depth. So just press just that little bit harder. And then just ease away. Make sure you get a nice sharp edge to that vein, and you can just put in very lightly a line there, and then we can fill this area in. Go back to the pressure of 1. Don't use the same pressure as the underside of that side vein. And then what I'm going to do is just make sure that that line doesn't look just like a line, that it just adds depth in that area by just adding another just light layer a little way down, like that. And then when you get down to this vein, again you just want just a very light line there, and underneath you can just put a little bit of extra depth at the top where it's on the lower side of the vein, and then just do your little circular movements again. And then from here it's going to get much lighter because that shadow then fades away. So we just want that to disappear, and that will disappear eventually into the green of the leaf. There we go. Just going to add just a little bit more just down that part there and in there. There are 1 or 2 other little veins up here, but we don't need to worry about those for now. Just going to put a little line in to remind me that there is one there. Not too concerned about it, it's not prominent. And then there's just a little bit of shading just here. And that again is just going to fade away so that you can't quite see where you've stopped the shading. That's fine. While we've got the sepia, just put in the tiniest little bit just in there, just to make that really stand forward. It won't at the moment, but it will do later, just that little bit of extra. And then we'll just have the tiniest touch just there and into there. It really is almost just a line, but we just soften the line a tiny bit. And then on this side of the vein, that's got a little bit of a curve to it, so don't draw it straight. And that's just got a little bit of a shadow on that side, just to there, and the same up here. That vein just finishes just below the fruit. There we go. Just going to leave that like that for now. There we go. That's great. So we don't really want any more of this, I don't think. There might be cause for just a little bit where this leaf is under the same big leaf here, but I'll decide on that. It might just be that we can use a little bit of extra green. So let's just put these veins in. So for the vein, I want a little bit of earth green, not earth green yellowish, just earth green. Make sure it's super sharp. And we're just going to put in, literally just stroke a tiny little bit just there. And it's almost on just the left hand side, coming across a tiny little bit. And then we're going to add a little bit of something warmer. So just get this just down there. And then when it gets to about here, it gets warmer anyway, so we don't need to worry. Bring a little bit of the earth green down here. It might not look the right colour, but it will be fine when we've finished. There we go. And it's a little bit darker on this side where this shadow is. Again, this won't particularly show, but it will when we've got some green on, so trust me on that. Right, now then, go over to your pale sage, if you have it, and just drop that in there. If you haven't got a pale sage, then use a Prismacolor, a polychromo cream. Will be more or less just the same result. And then we'll just bring that down here. And as you can see, I'm not taking out the graphite lines because the green will cover them. So we just want a little bit of this warmer shading down here. Like that. And then we can adjust. Because I don't indent, as I said, very rarely, then you can always adjust the vein colour. Whereas if you've indented, then it's much more difficult to get the pencil into that the groove that you've made in the paper. So let's move on now to chromium green opaque, and we're just going to put in a light layer again, just here, but this time we'll make sure that we are missing some of the veins. Give that leaf a knife's edge. And then just under there, it's just hinting at that other little vein up there that isn't really very prominent. Just, I can see it, so I'm prepared to put it in. And I'm just going to use this colour at the moment where we've put the sepia shadow, because I've got to then blend a little bit of this in with another colour. So I'm just going to do this little bit first. and work your way down to this little bit here. And on this side, just going to put a little bit of this along this section of the leaf. Make sure that the vein on this side, you can see where it joins the main vein. Doesn't show so much on this side. You've got just a little hint coming like there and there because there's a little bit of shading. So we don't want much here either, just a little hint. And then just going to put a little hint just in there. There we go. I think I've done enough for that. So now I just want to sharpen this because what I'm going to do is just put a little bit of it under here where it's catching the shading from the leaf above. So again, this time I'll have to pull out just a tiny bit and then go from here. You can see where it starts, just vaguely below where this other leaf comes to the side of it, and we'll just put in an edge to start with. Up to there, and then I'm just going to do some tiny little circular movements. You will see, if you look carefully at the photo, that there's a tiny gap of about 1/2 centimetre getting wider where the shadow is coming from the one underneath on this side and the one underneath on that side. So we're just wanting to just get enough shading in to make that look obvious, but without it being overdone. These little circular movements are just so much easier and neater when you've got a super sharp point on your pencil. Just means that you're getting the pigment from the pencil into the whole tooth of the paper, not just on the top surface, so it doesn't look grainy. Just going to make sure that that has got just a nice edge to that vein so that we don't lose it. Just take your time. Makes all the difference if you don't hurry it. And then we're going to put some just under here, a little bit darker on the lower edge, just a tiny bit. Kind of disappears, this one, into the shading. And then just follow this down here. And then we want to make sure that we've got just a fairly decent edge to that vein there, where it comes and curls downwards. And then we just want a tiny little bit under here, and I'm just going to go across there because there's a tiny little extra capillary vein that I want to show to give the leaf a little bit more interest down this edge, where we can see a few more of the venation patterns because it's catching the light just a tiny bit. So you don't have to kind of go wild, but it's nice if you can just put in some of these extras. You can see the difference that it makes to a finished leaf if you've got a few of these details in where necessary, without again doing too much, because less is more. So that's coming down to there, and then that will just fade out, and we can adjust this. As I said, you know, you can always come back and adjust little bits with an extra layer. So I'm just going to put in this now a little bit heavier, just up here, give it an extra layer. The second layer is always easiest if you've got the first one done nice and smoothly. And this, I know that it looks like a really sharp line at the moment, but it won't when we get the main body of colour on for the leaf. So don't worry about that, just fade that into there a little bit, and there, and that's where it comes out, just there. There we go. Okay, so that's enough of that for now. So now let's put the main body of colour on. Now for this, I think I'm going to use sap. Am I using sap green light or Kelly green? I think I'm going to use sap green light because it might need a little bit of warmth to it as well. Let's just be very careful and get this colour on. So we're going to do this left hand side first. I've put in some of these little side vein markings. We should be able to do these without worrying about another colour at present, but we'll see how we go, and if I feel we need it, then obviously I will let you know and I will change myself. So go down this vein. Let's just make sure that this is going to be a good colour. I'm always aware, of course, that you might have printed this out, and your configuration on your computer and printer might be slightly different to mine, so I'm telling you to use the colours that my photograph is. If you feel a desperate need to adjust the shades I'm picking and use your own because it suits your photograph, then obviously that's what you must do. The overall result will still be the same. So you can see I'm just leaving tiny little gaps for one or two little veins that are showing. Just don't want to leave too much. And we would definitely need a darker colour in here as well, but I think I'm going to be happy with putting on a light layer of this first anyway, even though I prefer to work from dark to light all the time. Sometimes it helps to get just the main colour on and then do some additions. And we've got a little blemish here. Just going to put that in now using a tiny little bit of sepia, not properly, but just so that I don't forget that I want it to be there, so I can work on that later. Now, in actual fact, just working on this as we are, I am finding that it's not going to be that easy to follow with just the sap green light, all of the veining. So I'm going back to my chromium green opaque, and I'm actually going to put in a little bit more of the shading. Although I have to say that it's not, well, no, it will be fine. You know what, when you've got you know, like hundreds and hundreds of different coloured pencils in your studio to choose from, it's terribly easy to think, oh well, that might not work, that might work, or you know, whatever. You've got too many choices almost, what I'm saying. So you know, sometimes it's not such a good idea to have so many, because lots of them, either on their own or in combinations, would get the results that we are looking for. But yeah, I'm happy that we just put a little bit more of this chromium green opaque down here. I think it will help quite a lot with these side veins that I definitely want them to show. So I'm happier doing this. And the best thing is to just, where I've drawn the line, just use that as the underside where there's a bit more shadow. And I'm just not going to put too many of them in. Don't want to go overboard. Okay, so we need a bit more down here. The veins, these side veins, they're not, as you will see from the photo, very sharp edged anyway, so we don't have to worry. We just want them, the hint that they're there. So you can see that just putting in these extra few is really going to aid the shape when we're working on the body colour. I was perhaps being a little ambitious, hoping that I could just do the body colour without this, but it just wasn't going to work. And as I said, we don't want too many of these, but there are some bits that really, you know, show up. So I'm just going to put in just a couple up here. I don't think we need anything else just there. And that one comes there, so no, we don't. Just put in a little bit of colour there. And then we'll finish off this edge as well, since even though we put in some of the sap green light, we can still put some of this in. And then I'm going to come down this edge as well while we're on this side. And just make sure that I've just got one or two nice little serrations showing on this edge. They're not all exactly the same, so just don't go down in a kind of zigzag movement. Do make sure that you follow. And then when we've got that line in, we can just now just gradate that inwards a little bit. There we go. Okay, so let's put in a few veins down this side as well. So we want this side of the side vein to be just a little bit deeper, so we get that in first. And then if you come down here, you'll see that just about here you've got just a tiny little hint of shading where there's a vein coming that way, and then there's another one quite quickly as well, just there. But that's all we need to do, just put those two in. Don't need to worry, I don't think, about any on this side at all. Come down this side of the vein and just put in just a little hint of chromium green opaque just here. And then at this bottom end here, we've actually got, so we've got that one coming there. We've got a little one just coming sideways on here. Put that in. And then you can see that I've just made a mark where there are a couple just down here, so we just get that shape in there. Again, you know, just tiny little bits that will make a difference. And then on this side we just need a little bit of extra green, just so that it shows a little bit. I always think leaves can look so messy at this stage, and then miraculously they all come together. So don't ever worry that it looks a little bit odd. Let's put in a couple of extra little serrations. Now, not all the serrations pick up the same amount of colour, so you don't have to be uniform about it. You can make one or two just a little bit lighter and some with just a tiny little bit of extra shading on. There we go. That's good. Right, let's get to work on this other side. Actually, it might be better to finish off this side. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use a little bit of, now let's decide again, got to decide. I think I would like to use earth green. I'm going to pick up the earth green and then maybe use a little bit more of the chromium green opaque, but I just want to get in a body of colour. Don't worry if you haven't used this one over here. As I said, it will all come together. So we'll just complete this side. We'll go over virtually everything now. Excuse me. Right, so I'm going to have to stop because I've got a bit of a cough coming along. Then we'll return to this and we'll finish this off. It needs some extra depth. So to finish off this side, I've picked up Kelly Green, which is a Prismacolor, and I'm just going to give some depth. Very gentle, but nevertheless we need some depth of green. And it's Kelly Green's actually, I know it's a soft and waxy colour, but It's actually got just a hint of warmth to it, even though it's one of the more grey greens. So I'm hoping that this will give the desired colour. I'm still going to leave the veins a little bit. I think I might add a little bit more cream to them. Yes, this is definitely much more the colour that I was hoping to achieve down this side. Yes, it's really coming together now. The veins are still showing up a bit too much, but that's no worry because we'll be dealing with those shortly. There we go, down to that little bit there, and then some on this area. It's much more the colour that I was hoping to achieve. It just goes to show you actually that although it's the back of a leaf from the same tree, the one at the top that we've already done is slightly different. So there's no formula for leaves. It's just, you know, whether it's in the light or the shade or the bright sun or being overshadowed by something, they all have their own oddities, which makes a piece of botanical artwork look so lovely and interesting, really. I don't like anything that's that looks a little bit, oh well, that's how you do a leaf, so let's do all the leaves the same, because once it looks formulaic, it doesn't look real anymore. Right, now I'm going to add a little bit of the ivory I'm going to use rather than cream. I just want to put a little bit of ivory onto the veins. And just on one or two of the little side ones as well. And then what I'm going to do is add a little bit of earth green yellowish, just skim it, literally skim it just across this outer edge here. You can see, I hope, how much difference that makes by just adding that tiniest touch of warmth to the green down this side. And then let's add a little bit more of the sap green light, and we're just going to skim across again just some of the vein areas so that they don't show up quite as much. And then just a tiny bit more of the chromium green opaque, just to make a few little bits stand out and give it a much more 3D effect. And then I'm just going to add a tiny little bit more earth green. Even though we've put the warmer green on, that's fine, but I'm just going to knock those veins back even more. There. And then by the time we've used the colourless blender on those, they will all blend in absolutely perfectly. So now we can work on the other side. Now, because this side is in fact a little bit more in the shade than this one, I've actually decided to use the chromium green opaque very, very gently now all the way across. So starting up here, I'm just going to do just a light layer, because when we put another colour over the top, it will give it the slightly milky look that you get on the underside of these leaves. We just want to make sure that we give the veins just that little hint of extra shading on the underside. Just use this so sparingly. So just, as I said, just lightly everywhere, and then we can enhance the veins that we want to show. I'll deal with the edge of this leaf down the bottom here in a moment or two. Okay, so that's got just that light layer on. So now with the same colour, let's just make sure that we've got the shading for the veins where we want it. So just put in a little bit of extra depth under that one, and just the tiniest little bit more over the top as well, just in there. A little bit more just in there, the tiniest little bit over the top, and just a little bit extra on the lower edge here. And the same on here. And we can just put in a couple of little extra dark bits just to hint at some more veining. Don't have to draw the whole vein in, just to indicate that there is one there. And then let's have a little bit of extra just on this side, just there, and a little bit more on this underside of this vein here. And just a tiny little hint of extra depth on there. Just make sure you leave that gap there, and in there. And we've got this little bit is a little bit darker. I'm just looking at where the shading is, and I did point out that there's just that little bit extra in the middle here, so I'm just going to enhance this little area here and just about here. Just like that. And then we'll just give a little bit of extra just down here. And then let's look at the edge of this leaf, and again just make sure that you get one or two of these serrated edges in that are a little bit darker than others. And then we'll just make sure that that isn't a solid line at the edge. We'll just bring that just a tiny little gradation inward to soften the edges. And then let's pick up our sap green light, and we'll use the sap green light over the whole of the leaf. And we can skim this across because we've already got a good layer. So as long as you're very careful and don't actually show lines, you can be quite quick with this. But if you have a tendency to be heavy-handed and lines show, then please just stick to the circular movements. As I said, we're just skimming across, no pressure whatsoever, just building up a little bit of the grey-green colour. So now I've done that, I'm going to make some adjustments to my shading in here, and I'm a bit concerned that I need a tiniest touch of sepia, so I'm going to put this into a holder. So I'm just going to put in, again, you can just, if you're very careful, just skim this across, and let's just build up just a little bit of shading where this leaf folds as it comes down the side here. And I'm just going to add the tiniest touch in here as well. It won't show very much, it's just that tiny little bit of extra shading where it's necessary, just adds to the interest of the leaf. And also in here I can just add a tiny bit more as well, but it is just little bits. And what we're going to do then is we're going to put some green over the top again, and then we can make sure that we cover some of the veins so that they don't look so prominent. So that's enough there, and then if we add the chromium green opaque again over the top, again you can skim this across and go over all of it this time. My ring's scratching on the table, so I turned it round. Very annoying for you otherwise. And then we just need another little touch of earth green so that we can colour in the veins a little bit more. Because we don't want all of them to show quite as much as this. And then just take a little bit of the pale sage and just bring that back into those bits near the main midrib vein so that they have a bit of a creamy look. Just skim it down there as well. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of cream, actually this time, not ivory. I just put a little bit of cream just down that central vein there, like that. And then I'm just going to, with my chromium green opaque, I'm just going to now really enhance this shading on this side and just really kind of give it a little bit of extra depth and form. As you can see, that makes the central vein really pop out more. And just a little bit down that side as well. And I'm just going to bring this all the way down because it covers some of the side veins a little bit to show that they are slightly in shadow there. There we go. That just stands out there really now. That's very, very nice. I like that. And you can see how it comes in there and just slightly out. So yeah, so that's another leaf done. So now we can move on to these little incidental side ones and then the lovely stalks, and it will all come super to life.